I tested literally every meta ad strategy that exists for ecom, and most of it either didn't work or stopped working the second I tried to scale. But there was one strategy, one specific thing I kept coming back to that got me past 100,000 sales. And I'm going to show you exactly what it is in this video. But here is what I want to say up front. And this is important. The reason most people never find this strategy isn't because it is complicated. It is because there is a specific mistake almost every ecom brand makes that actively blocks them from seeing it. And I made that same mistake for almost 2 years. So before I show you what worked, I need to show you why everything else failed. Because if you don't understand that part, you'll look at what I'm about to tell you and think it is too simple. And you'll go back to doing the thing that is quietly killing your account right now. So let's start there. When I first started running meta ads, I did what everyone does. I watched the tutorials, read the blogs, joined the Facebook groups, and built out what looked like a really solid account structure. Segmented campaigns, layered interest audiences, separate ad sets for each audience, the whole thing. And in the first couple weeks, it worked. I was profitable. I thought I figured it out. Then I tried to scale and everything fell apart. CPMs spiked. Frequency went through the roof. The audiences got saturated within days. I'd find a winning ad set, and by the time I doubled the budget, it had already burned out, and I kept chasing it, tweaking audiences, rebuilding campaigns, testing new interest combinations, convinced that somewhere in the targeting there was a configuration that would hold. There wasn't, and that is the first thing I had to learn the hard way. Targeting is not where the leverage is. It never was. But I'll come back to that because there is something more important I need to explain first. After about 6 months of this, I went deep on lookalike audiences. If you've been running meta ads for any amount of time, you know the logic, feed the pixel, let meta find more people who look like them. And honestly, lookalikes are still solid. I'm not here to tell you they don't work, but here is the thing. Nobody told me lookalikes are only as good as what you show them. I was building perfect audiences and then showing them mediocre ads. And a mediocre ad shown to a perfect audience still loses. I didn't understand that yet. So then I went into the campaign structure rabbit hole, CBO versus ABO. Everyone online has incredibly strong opinions about this. I tested both properly, not just for a week, and I can tell you with confidence that it basically doesn't matter. The algorithm is genuinely good at allocating budget. That is not where the game is played, but at this point I still didn't know where the game was played, so I kept looking in the wrong places. Manual bidding was next, cost caps, bid caps. I spent probably 3 months obsessing over bid strategy. And what I can tell you now is that bid strategy is like worrying about the fuel efficiency of a car that has a broken engine. Yes, it matters eventually, but not yet, not when the underlying problem hasn't been solved. And then I tried every funnel variation you can imagine, VSLs, advertorials, quiz funnels. None of them fundamentally changed what was happening in the account. And that is when I hit the moment that I think every serious ecom operator hits eventually, where you've tried everything the internet told you to try. None of it fully worked, and you're sitting there genuinely confused about what you're missing. Because clearly some people are scaling on meta. Clearly there are brands doing 8-9 figures through paid social. So what do they know that you don't? Here's what I found, and this is the part I want you to really sit with because it sounds almost too obvious when I say it. But the implications of it are massive, and most people still haven't followed them all the way through. Every single ad in my account that actually scaled, not just converted once, not just had a good week, but actually held performance as had one thing in common. The creative felt like it wasn't an ad, not polished, not produced, not branded. It felt like something a real person made. And I don't mean that in a vague authenticity is important kind of way. I mean it in a very specific psychological way that I'm going to break down right now, because this is where the actual insight is. And I don't want you to nod along and miss it. Think about how you use Instagram or you're scrolling, your brain is in a passive receptive state. You're not evaluating, you're just consuming. And your brain has gotten extremely good at one thing, pattern matching what is an ad and what is content. The millisecond your brain recognizes something as an ad, a filter goes up. You're now evaluating claims rather than absorbing them. And that filter is almost impossible to overcome no matter how good your copy is, because the damage is done before a single word registers. But here is what is interesting, that pattern matching is based almost entirely on visual and audio signals. The production quality, the graphic design, the music, the lighting, the way someone is speaking, when those signals match what people associate with ads, perfect lighting, branded lower thirds, professional voiceover. The filter goes up. When those signals match what people associate with regular content, someone talking into their phone, natural lighting, casual speech, the filter doesn't go up. And when the filter doesn't go up, something remarkable happens. People actually watch, they actually listen, and they actually believe what they're hearing because their brain categorized it as pure content rather than advertiser content before they had a chance to be skeptical about it. This is not a new phenomenon. Direct response marketers figured this out decades ago. The difference now is that the platform itself, the social feed, makes this effect more powerful than it has ever been, because the content people are scrolling past looks exactly like the kind of ad creative that should be working, which means the gap between what most brands are running and what actually converts is wider than it has ever been. And that is why user-generated content outperforms professional production in almost every ecom ad account running at scale right now, not because it is cheaper to make, not because it feels more authentic in some fuzzy brand sense, because it literally bypasses the cognitive filter that kills ad performance before the message even has a chance to land. Now, here is where it gets interesting, and this is the part I genuinely don't hear people talk about enough. Understanding why UGC works is only half the insight. The other half is understanding why most brands can't actually execute it at the scale required to make it their growth engine. And if you don't understand the second half, you end up in a situation that is honestly worse than just running bad polished ads. Because, what the answer is, you just can't get enough of it. Real UGC is slow. You find a creator, you write the brief, you negotiate the rate, you wait for the content, you get it back, and half of it is unusable because the lighting was bad, or they went completely off script, or the audio sounds like they recorded it in a wind tunnel. You go back and forth on revisions, you finally have something usable, you put it in the account, it works for 3 weeks and then fatigues, and now you need to start the whole process over, except you're also trying to run a business and manage inventory and deal with customer service and do everything else that comes with ecom. This is the hamster wheel. And this is why brands that understand UGC at a conceptual level still plateau, because the supply chain for creative is broken. You know what you need, but you can't produce it fast enough to keep the machine running. I want to pause here and make sure you understand why this matters beyond just the annoyance of it, because there is a math problem underneath this that most people don't think about explicitly. The algorithm needs creative variety to find your buyers efficiently. When you're running the same 3 creatives for 6 weeks, the algorithm has already mined out the easy conversions from the people most likely to respond to those specific ads. The cost per result starts climbing not because the audience is saturated, it is often not, but because you've shown those specific creatives to the people most likely to respond, and you're now reaching people who need a different angle, a different hook, a different problem framing to convert. The creative needs to evolve faster than the account fatigues, and most brands can't do that. The brands that figured this out, and there are a handful of them running absolutely insane numbers right now, they solved the creative volume problem. And the way the fastest growing ones solved it is something that wasn't even possible 2 years ago. But I'm going to hold that for a few minutes because I want to make sure I give you the creative framework first, because even if you solve the volume problem, if the creative itself isn't structured correctly, it doesn't matter how much of it you have. Here is the framework I use. I call it problem solution proof. And I know it sounds like something you'd read on a marketing blog, but stay with me, because the way most people apply this is wrong. And the difference between the right application and the wrong application is the difference between a 2% CTR and a 7% CTR. The problem element is where 90% of ads fail, including ads that are supposed to be UGC. Most brands, even when they're using real creators and real people, still brief those creators to lead with the product. Hey, I love this moisturizer, let me tell you about it. And the moment they do that, they've lost, because nobody wakes up wanting to hear about your product. They wake up thinking about their own life, their own problems, their own frustrations. The ads that performed best in my account by a huge margin opened with a problem so specific and so accurately described that the right person watching felt like we were reading their mind, not struggling with dry skin that is too vague. More like, I don't know if this is just me, but I was waking up every morning and my skin felt so tight that it was uncomfortable to smile. That specificity creates an immediate emotional response in the viewer that says, wait, that is exactly me, and that response is worth more than any targeting, any bid strategy, any campaign structure you could possibly build, because now they're watching, now they care. Now, the solution element, this is where most brands make the second mistake. They pivot from the problem to the product and start listing features. Hyaluronic acids, ceramides, SPF 30, and I get it, you're proud of your product, you want people to know what is in it, but features don't convert, outcomes convert. The job of the solution element is not to explain what your product is, it is to paint a picture of what life looks like after the problem is gone. Within 3 days, I wasn't waking up uncomfortable anymore. Within a week, my partner noticed. Within 2 weeks, I stopped thinking about it. That is what converts. Not because it is manipulative, it is the most honest thing you can say about your product, but because it connects the product to an outcome the viewer actually wants. And then proof. This is the piece that UGC format handles almost automatically, and it is the reason the format is so powerful. When a real person is talking on camera about a result they actually experienced, the proof element is built into the medium. You're not making a claim, someone is sharing an experience, and that carries a completely different weight psychologically. But here is the nuance most people miss, even in UGC. The proof needs to be specific to be credible. It really worked for me means nothing. I ordered on a Tuesday, started using it Thursday. And by the following weekend, I'd gotten 3 unprompted compliments from people who had never said anything about my skin before. That is proof. The specificity is what makes it land. Generic claims are invisible, your brain just slides right past them. Specific claims create a mental image, and mental images create desire. Now, I want to talk about something that took me a long time to figure out, and I think it is one of the most underrated insights in ecom advertising. And that is the relationship between your ad and what happens after the click. Most people treat these as 2 separate problems. Ads team runs ads, website team runs the website, and nobody is really thinking about what the handoff feels like. But here is what actually happens psychologically. Your ad makes a promise. It creates a specific emotional state and a specific set of expectations. The person clicks, and in the 2 to 3 seconds between clicking and your page loading, they are primed for a very specific experience. If your page delivers that experience, same tone, same visual language, same problem being addressed, same emotional register, you get a conversion. If there is any mismatch, if the page feels more corporate or the imagery is different, or the headline is talking about something other than the problem the ad just addressed, you don't just lose the conversion, you lose it and the person feels vaguely deceived. Even if nothing technically deceptive happened, that feeling kills return traffic and it kills word of mouth. The accounts I've seen that convert at a genuinely elite level treat the ad and the landing page as a single continuous experience. The ad is the first half of a sentence. The page finishes it, and when you get that right, you'll sometimes see conversion rates that don't even look real, because you're removing almost every friction point between attention and purchase. Okay, now I want to come back to the volume problem, because this is the thing that is actually separating the top ecom brands from everyone else right now, and it is moving faster than most people realize. I said earlier that the brands running the biggest numbers have solved the creative volume problem, and when I started digging into how they were doing it, specifically the ones that had scaled fastest in the last 12 to 18 months, the answer was consistently the same. They were using AI-generated UGC. Now, I know what you're thinking, because I thought the same thing when I first heard it. AI video looks fake, it looks uncanny, people will immediately know it is not real, and a year and a half ago, that was completely true. The first generation of AI video tools produced content that nobody would mistake for a real person. It was obviously synthetic and it performed accordingly, but the tools available right now are categorically different. I mean, that literally, it is not an incremental improvement. It is a different category of output. The realism has crossed a threshold where when you watch this content in a social feed, not in a side-by-side comparison, not with a critical eye, just scrolling the way you actually use the app, your brain does not flag it as synthetic, it reads as a real person. And when it reads as a real person, it performs like a real person, because the psychological mechanism that makes UGC work isn't about whether the person is biologically human. It is about whether your brain categorizes the content as peer content or advertiser content. And the best AI UGC being produced right now gets categorized as peer content. Consistently, what that means practically is something that is genuinely hard to overstate. A brand can now generate 50 variations of a UGC style ad in less time than it used to take to brief a single human creator. The economics of creative testing have completely changed. Things that used to require a massive production budget are now accessible to a brand doing 50,000 a month in revenue. And the brands that have figured this out first, they are running laps around everyone else. The gap in creative testing velocity between those brands and the ones still on the traditional UGC hamster wheel is enormous, and it is compounding every month. This is the thing that got me past 100,000 sales, not a new audience trick, not a campaign structure discovery. The ability to produce authentic, high-converting UGC creative at a volume that let me actually test fast enough to learn what worked, and then pour fuel on it once I knew. Now, let me talk about how I actually structured the account once I had that creative engine running, because the campaign structure is not complicated, but there are a few things I do differently than most people that matter a lot. I run 3 layers. Layer 1 is pure cold traffic, broad targeting, no interest stacking, no lookalikes. Just open the floodgates and let the algorithm work. I know this sounds counterintuitive if you've been told your whole meta career that you need to give the algorithm help finding your audience. But the algorithm in 2026 genuinely does not need your help with that anymore. What it needs is good creative to use as a signal. Give it 20 variations of a strong UGC ad and let it figure out who responds. It will find your buyers better than you will. The key is that you need enough creative diversity for it to have something to learn from. Layer 2 is warm retargeting, video viewers, website visitors, add to carts, anyone who has touched the brand in the last 30 to 60 days. The creative in this layer is different. It is not trying to introduce the problem. These people already know the problem. It is handling objections. What made them not buy the first time? Price, trust, uncertainty about whether it would work for their specific situation. The creative here should be addressing those hesitations directly. Social proof from real customers, specific results, risk reversal, This layer has a much higher ROAS than cold traffic, and most people overinvest in it because of that. But it is not what grows the business. Cold traffic grows the business. This layer just closes the loop. Layer 3 is customer reactivation, past buyers targeted with replenishment offers or complementary products. If you are selling anything consumable, anything with a natural reorder cycle, or anything with a logical second purchase, this layer can quietly represent 10 to 20% of your total revenue at almost zero incremental acquisition cost. Most brands skip this layer entirely. That is just free money sitting on the table. Budget allocation, I run roughly 60% to cold, 30% to warm retargeting, 10% to reactivation. Those numbers move based on what is performing, but cold traffic never goes below 50%. The second you start starving the cold traffic layer to chase the higher ROAS from warm audiences, you're slowly strangling your own growth. New customer volume is the leading indicator. Everything else is a lagging indicator. Protect it. Now, metrics, because this is where I spent a long time looking at the wrong scoreboard. ROAS is the metric everyone optimizes for. It is also, in my opinion, one of the most dangerous metrics in ecom advertising if you don't understand what it is actually measuring. Here is the problem. Warm audiences convert at a much higher rate than cold audiences, which means they have a much higher ROAS. So if you're optimizing for ROAS, the algorithm will naturally push budget toward warm audiences. Your overall ROAS number looks great, but you're not acquiring new customers. You're just converting people who are already going to buy. And when the warm audience drains, which it does, because it is fed by cold traffic that you're now starving, the whole thing collapses. I have watched this happen to accounts doing 7 figures. It is ugly and it happens fast. The metric I actually run my business on is new customer acquisition cost. What does it cost me to acquire someone who has never bought from this brand before? That is the number. Everything else is downstream of that number. Once I know my average order value, my repeat purchase rate, and my rough customer lifetime value, I can calculate exactly how much I'm willing to pay for a new customer. And once I have that ceiling, I can make every budget and bidding decision rationally. Without that number, you're flying blind. The second metric I care about is creative performance disparity. This one most people don't even track. The question is simple. What is the gap between my best performing creative and my worst performing creative? A massive gap tells me I'm getting lucky on one ad and I don't actually know why it is working. A tight cluster tells me I've learned something systematic about what resonates with my audience and I can apply it deliberately. The goal over time is to have your floor keep rising. Your worst performing creative getting better because each round of testing is teaching you something real. And at the creative level, hook rate, the percentage of people who watch past the first 3 seconds. If your hook rate is below 20%, nothing else matters. You're losing the audience before a single word of your message lands. Hook rate is the purest signal of whether your problem framing is connecting. It is the number I look at first when a new creative goes live, before I look at conversion rate, before I look at anything else. There are a few things I genuinely wish I'd understood earlier that I want to make sure I say clearly before I wrap this up. The offer is more important than almost anything, and I don't mean discount, I mean clarity. I have seen accounts where the ads were genuinely great, the creative was converting, the traffic was there, and the product page was so unclear about what you were actually getting, what it cost, why you should believe it, and why you should buy now, that the conversion rate was half of what it should have been. I've watched brands go from a 2% conversion rate to a 4% conversion rate without changing a single ad, just by making their product page simpler and more direct. That is a 100% increase in revenue from the same ad spend. Fix your offer before you try to fix your ads. Patience is genuinely the hardest thing in paid media, not technically patience. The algorithm needs time to learn. Creative needs enough impressions to produce statistically meaningful data. Most people make decisions too fast. They kill a creative after 3 days and $40 of spend, and they have no idea whether it would have worked or not. The rule I use is that I don't make any meaningful judgment about a creative until it has had at least 1,000 impressions. Ideally more. Anything before that is noise. Killing creatives too early is one of the most expensive mistakes you can make because you're paying for the learning and then throwing it away before it produces any insight. And the last thing, and this might be the most important one, your creative learning compounds. Every test tells you something. Every hook that worked tells you something about how your audience describes their own problem. Every proof statement that converted tells you what outcome they're actually buying. Every angle that flopped tells you what they don't care about. And if you're systematic about capturing those learnings, actually writing them down, building a picture of your customer psychology over time, the creative gets dramatically better every single quarter, not incrementally better, dramatically better, because you're not guessing anymore. You're building on accumulated evidence. The brands that are impossible to compete with on Meta aren't necessarily the ones with the biggest budgets. They're the ones that have been running systematic creative tests for 2 or 3 years and have built a depth of knowledge about their customer that nobody can replicate overnight. That is what got me to 100,000 sales, not one magic strategy. A creative engine that produced enough volume to test fast, a framework that made every piece of creative structurally sound, a campaign structure that fed new customers into the funnel consistently, and metrics that told me the truth instead of just what I wanted to hear. If you want to see the exact process I used to generate the UGC style creative that powers all of this, without a production budget, without waiting on human creators, at the volume that actually makes a difference, I've linked everything below this video. It is the part of this system most people ask me about most, and I've laid it out step by step so you can actually implement it, not just understand it conceptually. Watch that next. It'll make everything I just covered actually usable.